The second church that Jesus speaks to is the church in Smyrna. That's Revelation chapter 2, verses 8 to 11. And it says this: "To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came to life again. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death." Jesus introduces himself to the church at Smyrna with the same title as he did in chapter 1, verse 17 and 18. He is the one who is sovereign over all of history. And that's important for the church in Smyrna because the message for them is not an easy one to hear. He tells them that he knows about their afflictions, their sufferings, and their poverty. Smyrna is another rich harbour city which was flourishing, but the church was suffering and impoverished. Probably this is because the Jews, against whom Jesus has some very strong words, that they are the synagogue of Satan, have disowned the Christians. Now, the Jews disowning their own Messiah, they've now, through their slander, caused Jesus' church to be impoverished and to thrown into prison and to be persecuted. The reason this is the case is that the Christians initially enjoyed some protection from Roman expectations of emperor worship, because to the Romans, the Christians looked a lot like Jews, and Jews were exempt from things like sacrificing to the emperor because they were an acceptable religion. But now it looks like that Jews have distanced themselves and probably informed on the Christians. And because new religions are simply unacceptable to the Roman Empire, persecution has arisen. And there is more persecution to come. Some, say Jesus, will be imprisoned. Some will be murdered for their faith in Jesus. But Jesus has only words of encouragement for the church in Smyrna. Whilst they are poor economically, whilst they are persecuted, they are actually, in Jesus, fabulously rich. A warning for us here to resist equating economic prosperity with spiritual riches, if ever there was one. Jesus also promises them his presence. He knows their afflictions, he says. They are not abandoned in the midst of their suffering. In fact, suffering is so often used by God to strip us, his people, of our self-reliance. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 and 9 to see how the Apostle Paul grasps this truth. And hold on to it, folks, in the midst of whatever suffering you are facing. Because of this, Jesus remains in total control. Even though the devil will put them to the test, they're able to remain faithful because God has limited the persecution. 10 days there in verse 10 isn't a literal 10 days. The 10 is symbolic of fullness, much like we often round up to 10. So here God is decided, he's determined that this persecution will only go on for as long as he allows, as he has decided, in the fullness of his own time. And he will give grace to stand faithful in the midst of that. The test for the Christians is their willingness to remain separate from the world in which they live, refusing to bow down and worship the Emperor of Rome. Now, if they did that, the persecution would end. But the call and encouragement is to remain faithful, even if it costs you your life. The promise of Jesus is that if you die, remaining faithful to Jesus means that you won't face the second death, and instead will be given a victor's crown. You'll reign with Jesus in the new resurrection when it comes. Whoever has ears, hear what the Spirit says to the church, even today. Here's the call to be faithful in overt opposition and persecution, helping us to understand that even life itself is worth giving up in order to be faithful to Jesus. We in the UK aren't anywhere near this yet, but perhaps the question for us is this: what are we willing to give up in order to remain faithful to Jesus Christ? The answer is probably in the area of status or job promotion or financial reward. That tends to be the way our culture rewards its worshippers. Jesus says instead, come out of the world, remain faithful to him.